Welcome, everybody, to the Total BS podcast, or the Total BS show, I should say. I'm Levi Stevenson.
And I'm Derek Vital Cheese.
We're here to make you want to talk about politics again, to make it easier to talk about. And we've been talking about doing a project like this for quite a while now. It's been in the works for a while because Derek and I are both pretty. We both try to stay as connected politically as we can. We keep up on different things and try to stay as well informed as we can. But not everybody has the time to do that. So we wanted to let our labors of trying to be as informed as we possibly can, let that try to benefit you, because it's really hard to stay informed in our world right now with as much stuff as going on with as quickly as the news cycle changes over. It's easy to miss things. It's easy to get caught up in the BS. So I guess, Derek, what was your motivation for wanting to start something like this?
It's always kind of been a passion of mine, I guess. Maybe not always, but when I sort of hit around 30, I kind of started to poke around in the realm of politics, and I've been at this for probably about 10 or 12 years now. And when I got into it, I got into looking at political issues, political events, and I really kind of noticed that it was really easy for the American people to kind of just get caught up in the spin and the lie of everything. I mean, it's kind of, and maybe lie is a little bit too strong, maybe misdirection. We all know politics is pretty dirty. It isn't the cleanest of all realms. But I started to notice that the things that they would tell to the people, they just weren't lining up with what was really going on, and it just became kind of like really upfront to me, like out in the open to me. I just really kind of recognized it, and it made me just want to dig and to research more and more. And then as I started to come into contact with, and I thought everybody notices this, and it's just something that we let go, we let happen.
Sure.
And I started to find out that not everybody was like me. Like, very few people were like me, and when I first started out, it was difficult. I thought I was the outlier, and I was,
Right.
but I thought I was the outlier of information. And it's like, I come to find out, moving down the road, by doing your own research, by not really ever trusting what they tell you, and just questioning like every single thing that I came across, I really started to realize, like, the more I did that and the more I just had faith in that system, the more informed I actually became. Now, on the flip side of that, the problem with all that is you kind of ostracize yourself or disenfranchise yourself
Sometimes,
from a
yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah, and that's a difficulty an unfortunate difficulty that I think a lot of people are starting to encounter, is that, factually supported or not, if you have an opinion, someone's probably mad at you for having that opinion. and
Absolutely.
and that's just, it's kind of the that's just kind of the nature of the beast at this point in time. And it's the reason that a lot of people really hate talking about politics now. They not because they don't want to, not because they actually don't want to talk about it or they don't think it's important, but they're just not at all wanting to deal with whatever is going to come with that conversation, whether it be personal insults or just general nasty behavior or whatever it is. Nobody wants to deal with that stuff. And
Well,
that's,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think when I first started doing this, I noticed that you could debate. 10 years ago, you could debate. You could have good
Yeah.
debates.
Yep.
Today, I've had points in time where as I've taken my name off of Facebook. I've taken my photos down. I've been threatened because I've had not even differences in opinion, because I have presented facts to people and they can't deal with them. It just kind of shatters their narrative. And once that happens, you start to really see the bad side of people. So in doing this, going on this endeavor and in having this project, I'm trying to get information out to people,
Mm-hmm.
so people that were in my situation years ago can have some, they can have some confidence and some ammunition, if for nothing else. And I'm not telling people to listen to me. Don't listen to me. Uh, just listen to the overall message of, take a little bit of time out of your day, question. Don't just take stuff for granted. Question everything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't trust anything that's spoon fed to you. I quickly got onto sites for video and for audio that uh, backed up their sources,
Mm-hmm.
really quickly. And I leaned on those like a crutch because you can't win an argument without doing that.
Right. Yep. And that's kind of what we want to do with this show, though, is we want to make it a fact-based thing. We want to try to find you as many facts as we can, and we want to present it everything in as objective a way as we possibly can. We're not when we're giving you information. I mean, we're still human beings. We still make mistakes. We don't have unlimited time to peruse the internet for every single link and every single picture and everything on this green earth. So if we're talking about something and we miss a really key piece of information, then it is what it is. Well, I shouldn't say it's not what it is, but let us know. Like if you find something like this doesn't jive at all with this piece of information, leave it in the comments or whatever it is. Let us know if we miss something big. But either way, we're going to try to bring it to you as an objective as way possible, because we know you are sick of dealing with the BS, dealing with the spin that you get from a lot of major news outlets. And it's just, people are tired of it, and that we want to take care of that problem. So we're going to do our best. If we are sharing our opinions, you will know about it. We'll tell you, this is our opinion, this is our interpretation of these facts. And if it's not, you're also going to know about it. We're going to make this as objective as possible to talk about issues that you need to know about, that you may not have heard about, that you may not have time to research. You may have heard about it tangentially on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is. But we want to make sure that you are aware of these different things, so that when they come up, you know how to properly process them, deal with them, and use them in your daily life. And like I said, these things are not our opinion. If they are our opinion, we will definitely let you know. So the first thing we want to talk about, Derek's going to ask to step away for a second, but the first thing we wanted to talk about is the storm, the Iowa Derecho storm, or Derecho storm. Sorry, I mispronounced that. It's essentially a big windstorm that plowed through Iowa recently, and did tremendous amount of damage. Had winds rivaling like 100, and I think I heard a report of 140 miles an hour now, which was a corrected number from last week, I believe. 140 miles an hour I believe that's a Category 3 hurricane, if I remember correctly. While not technically a hurricane, as one National Weather Service or maybe Weather Channel representative so kindly pointed out on Twitter. I didn't post his tweet in here, but felt it necessary to correct that it wasn't in fact a hurricane. But to illustrate, I'll show you a little bit of what happened here. So this is Iowa, and you can see inside that oval there is a light circle, a light patch, whatever you want to call it, and that is the path of the damage. That is all of the blown over fields, destroyed homes and cities and everything. And it's just something that it devastated a huge amount of farmland. I think it was 10 million acres, 12 million acres. I think it was 10 million acres was the final estimate. And that is about, I think it's about a third of Iowa's total farmland. That's a huge issue. Iowa itself controls about, I've seen estimates anywhere between like 9 and 12% of the United States food chain. So you're talking about a third of 12%, so 4% of the entire food chain getting blown over in the course of like a couple hours, is a big deal. And that was something that we really had to. It's been a process to get cleaned up, and there's still cleanup going on. There still will be for months ahead of time, and. So a few things here. I want to show a couple pictures. One of the things that is really striking is just the scale of the damage. Really, is how alarming some of these pictures are. Credit to my good friend Jared Larson. Oh, thank you, Jared. speaking of Jared, just hopped in the comments and told me it's actually a Category 4 hurricane that it registered at in Iowa. And
Nice.
Speaking of which, I just pulled up his picture. So thank you, Jared, for allowing us to use your picture of a house near Delta, Iowa, that obviously got the worst end of a tree. And then we got a few pictures here from another good friend of mine, Carly Martin. She lives over in Marion, Iowa, and you can see some of the pictures of her farm. Let me get them pulled up here real quick. You can see a few of these. There we go. Got a couple pictures there. So this is her farm. You can see lots of tree damage there. Pretty incredible to look at. And you can see in this picture here, all of the corn laid over. Some of that is standing still somewhat vertically that it can be picked. So that particular field may not lose a lot, but it's hard to tell from this angle. But the blown over crop damage is going to be a serious problem going forward, and we're going to touch on that a little bit in our crop insurance section. And then we've got another photo here. This is an overhead of her farm near Marion, that you can see all the debris out in the field. You've got buildings in terrible shape. It's just tons and tons of damage. This is only one farm too. I mean, we're talking about, literally a third of the land area of Iowa that's been affected by this. And it's a devastating storm. But one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this, we're not really actually going to talk about the Derecho necessarily, but what we want to talk about is the after effect, what it looks like for the farmers afterwards, because they're dealing now with a really significant, not just a situation, but just a life. This is a life impacting situation, because not just are they losing corn to, not only losing corn and beans to be getting blown over, but there's grain bins that are collapsed. There are machine sheds that are collapsed. Farmers losing everything they need to do their job, just getting blown over and destroyed. And that's a bigger thing here too. So the reason I wanted to talk about crop insurance, beyond it just being a big topic going forward for among the farming community, is it was also sort of brought up by a person named Aaron Calvin. If that name sounds familiar to you, it is because he also wrote an article last fall about Carson King, who was an Iowa State student who, long story short, accidentally raised $3 million for a children's hospital by making it
accidentally.
Yeah, that's honestly a really good way to describe it. He went on College game day, made a sign that said, "I need beer money. Here's my Venmo," and people started sending him a lot of money, and he ended up raising $3 million for a children's hospital.
And since $3 million is more than you need for beer, he decided, hey, why not be a bigger person here and put this to good use?
Right. Yep. So, in a world where no good deed is left unpunished, Mr. Calvin here decided to run a story on Mr. Carson King and dug up some old Facebook posts from when he was like 13 or 14 years old. Found some rap lyrics in there that had some bad language in them, and decided to essentially try to kind of cancel him. And whether you believe in cancel culture or not, it's just a verb. It tried to kind of smear him a little bit, and he got absolutely shouted down from the mountaintops. Everybody in the state of Iowa was calling for Aaron Calvin's head. Well, he decided to poke his head out of the ground once again, like Puxatawny Phil. Except for this time, Puxatawny Phil pokes his head out, and everybody's got a 12-gauge shotgun pointed at his face. And right now, everybody wants to pull the trigger because this time around, Mr. Aaron Calvin decided to tweet out something. I should have put the tweet in here, but I didn't. But essentially, something to the effect of that Iowa farmers you don't really need to worry about them because they have crop insurance, and that didn't go over super well.
And on top of that is a vastly ignorant statement.
That's like,
I mean,
whew. Man, someone gets a tree dropped on their house and their tractor is laying upside down 300 meters away in the field, and I don't need to worry about them. They'll be fine. They got crop insurance. So because crop insurance is something that not a lot of people actually may know much about. It's it's a really niche type of insurance. Not, people don't just have it like they have car insurance, home insurance, health insurance, all that stuff or whatever. It's totally niche to this specific industry. But it's important for you to know about because it affects your food chain. As we talked about, this affected a third of the state that produces 12% of the food chain. And this affects all the people that produce it. It affects their livelihood and their ability to do their jobs going forward. So crop insurance, essentially, what it is basically what's the best way?
Well, it's like any other insurance.
It really is just like any other insurance. It's calculated a little bit differently. So basically, the way you do this, we're gonna start at the beginning, and we're gonna kind of go through a kind of a typical year as far as how crop insurance is done, so we can at least understand the general mechanisms behind it. So the first step here is when you decide in the spring that you're going to purchase crop insurance for your field, and you have to do so by March 15th. So before March 15th, you're going to decide that you want crop insurance, and so then you go to your adjuster or whatever it is, and they calculate what's called your guarantee. So to do that, they are going to take the spring corn price. That's the February average of the December futures. December futures it's kind of it's a term for what corn's going to sell for later down the road. But this is the February average. So they're going to take that price times the APH, which is your average, which is your actual production. I lost the thing off the top of my head, but it's your 10-year rolling average of your bushels per acre that you get when you're harvesting corn or any grain, I should say. It's your 10-year rolling average, and then this is going to be your coverage level is your next multiplier. So you can get from anywhere between 50 and 85%, essentially, is where you're going to be at. And so we're going to do a sample here. I was provided some very, very helpful information by a good friend of mine, Alan. So thank you, Alan, for helping me out with this. It's actual production history. Thank you. So I just pulled that up. So let's do a sample here. So
now, let me ask this question. Where does the 85% come in? Is that like a multiplier they give you?
Yeah. So, okay. So essentially it's your coverage level. It's how much of your yield or how much of your acreage you're going to be covered for. It's how much of your yield or how much of your acreage at a particular yield. Okay,
so they come up with a number, and then you get 85%.
Well, you can pay.
That.
Yes. So this is sort of how they come up with the number. So 388 was this year's February average for the December futures. 388 a bushel. Let's say your 10-year rolling average is 200 bushels an acre, and you paid for 85% coverage. That comes out to about $659.60 per acre guaranteed. So now
is there a buy up? Is there a buy up in that? You said.
Well, you
can get a higher percent coverage.
He did not mention anything higher than 85%. Maybe you can if you pay some super ultra premium, but we may have to look if we may have to look into that, or if someone has some insight into that. We would definitely love to know. But he specifically mentioned right off 50 to 85%. So then when you figure out, so now we have the storm comes around, and we have to figure out what's going on. So. Well, actually, let's stick with the timeline. So your insurance, you decide you get your quote back in March 15th is when you submit for insurance. Then you have in May, usually it's late May or early June, you have what's called the final plant date. That is the last day you can have your crops in the ground. And every day past that final plant date, you lose 1% on your coverage level. So if you started with 85%, that's what you paid for, but you were 4 days late with getting your crops in the ground, you are actually going to get 81% coverage, even though you're going to be paying for 85% because your crops are in the ground late.
So you get a penalty.
You do get a penalty. Yes,
for being late.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's because the rule exists because somebody at some point has probably exploited that. Which is why a lot of rules exist, because somebody did something stupid sometime.
Somebody got hurt somewhere.
Somebody's baby fell in a bucket. But the rule's in place, but sometimes it does get farmers in a tight position, like we saw in 2019, where there was a lot of rain, a lot of flooding. Guys just could not get crops in the ground because it was so wet, and that put a lot of farmers in a tough spot. But get moving along to the fall. August 15th is when the first premium is due. So you're actually paying sort of a deferred payment type of thing.
Now, I want to. So here's where my mind's going here, real quick, because you mentioned the flooding. Now, I remember. I don't think it was 2019. I think it was 3, 4, 5 years ago somewhere. We had a lot of flooding as well, and I wonder if that's in there in part anyway, to keep farmers kind of honest, keep them from going. There is a lot of rain, there is a lot of flooding, keep them from going, forget it, I'll just claim it on insurance and won't even plant the field.
Yeah, won't even try. Yeah.
So at least they have to put forth the capital to get the seed in the ground and give it a good attempt.
Right. I would be curious to see what the case was. Who messed up to make that rule in place?
Because I'm sure insurance companies are sitting back and they're not going to want to pay you for a field in which you really technically didn't lose anything because you never planted anything.
Right. That seems reasonable enough. We'll have to ask around a little bit.
That's just where my head's going, man. I don't know.
It seems logical enough. But say August 15th is when your first premium is due. But the Derecho showed up on August 10th. So imagine getting your house blown down and your crops destroyed and your grain bins collapsed, and 5 days later there's your insurance premium bill showing up in the mail.
Well, yeah, and I think because I didn't know this. I got friends here where I live that farm, but I've never really, my father was a farmer when I was just a little boy, so I never really got to that level of questioning it. And I've not really questioned my friends until I was in adulthood. But a lot of farmers use their grain bins as more or less their bank. They'll keep grain until the price fluctuates to where it's favorable for them. And then they'll take some out and go sell it. So if you imagine imagine this storm goes through and just blows your bank away, right, and then they're like, well, sorry, too bad.
You had all your money in a box and now the box got blown away. It's all over the field.
Yeah. And that's effectively what that is. So, now so not only are they out that money, but they have to pay this massive this massive premium in what would you say 4 days? I mean, I don't know. We live in a country where we struggle to be able to save 1 month in sustainable living. So I couldn't imagine putting that onus on farmers or anybody for that matter.
So a couple of things there. One, we're going to talk about in a little bit too, but there becomes an issue too where if you lose your grain bins, now you have a storage issue as well.
Absolutely.
And then the second part of that too is now, fortunately, the deadline to pay that is ordinarily October 1st, but this year it has been moved back for this season, it's been moved back to January 31st of 2020. So they do have extra time to pay it now without accruing interest. So that's
2021.
Yeah. So 2021. January 31st, 2021 is the last day that they'll have to pay their premium without accruing interest. But to get back to our calculation, so now the Derecho's hit and we want to claim crop insurance. Well, to do that, you still actually have to attempt to destroy your crop. Destroy also includes harvest. It's kind of a weird way to describe it because you wouldn't think of harvesting as destroying, but harvesting is included in destroying. So you essentially have to attempt to harvest it, or even if you're not actually harvesting the corn, you might try to turn it into silage or something like that. Whatever. You have to do something. And when this corn is blown over, you're also exposing it to lower test weights and exposing it to different diseases and all sorts of critters that ordinarily don't have access to the corn. Now they do. So you're losing stuff there. So what they're going to do now is to figure out what we're going to get from the insurance company. We're going to take our October average because since we have to harvest it, in some of these fields we'll still have something harvestable in them. So you're still going to wait till the ordinary, like the normal harvest time of year to try to take up whatever you can. So that's probably going to be in October. So they're going to, October, early November, and you're going to take the October average of those December futures, not the February one, but the October one now. And let's say we're at 342. but you can only, because of all the crops that are blown down, you can only get 75 bushels an acre. So now we're at 342 to 75 bushels an acre. So you're going to make approximately $256.50 an acre from whatever grain you can harvest. In this case, corn, and whatever corn you can harvest. So if you do the math there, 659.60 minus 256.50, I mean, you'll get a check for $403.10 per acre from the insurance company to the farmer.
Now, what's the duration on that? What's the timeline on that check, essentially? Like, how long do they have to wait for that? Because I know, like, you wreck your car, the next 2 days later, you have, your insurance guy come out, he writes a claim, and a week later you have a ticket. I mean, does it function the same? I can't imagine it functions the same.
It's not as quick a turnaround. It's not anything obscene. It would come in time for them to make that January 31st payment, most likely. Okay. But the tricky part here is, as you said, those grain bins act as a bank, basically. It's it's essentially so they can sell it when they need money. But when you don't have, what you had is now gone, and now you don't have any place to put the corn, whatever corn you can pick up after the derecho of the flattened corn, whatever you can pick up. Now you don't have a place to put it, really, because your grain bins are gone. The grain elevators in town are gone. Let's say your neighbor has one that somehow made it. It's not legal to store grain at your neighbor unless they have a particular license. Most people don't know that. It's like, if you're just because you're the farm across and down the road has a grain bin doesn't mean, and he said, yeah, go ahead and put it in there, whatever. It is not legal for you to store your grain in your friend's bin unless they have a particular license.
Now, what about the grain that's in the bin? Like, is that also? I'm sure that's insured as well. Is that also insured? And how is that? It's
not covered under the same insurance. It'd be a different type of insurance. This particular one, the main one that we're talking about here, is called multi-peril crop insurance. That's by far the most popular one because it's the simplest one. Makes the most sense. There are actually a few other ones. I think there's 3 other main programs, but they're kind of weirdly complex, and they actually use equations that rely on for the actual production history. Instead of using your individual farm, they take it by the county. So they take whatever the county is producing over a 10-year rolling average and give it based on that. So if you're better than everybody else around you, that's not good.
You're kind of screwed.
Yeah, that's not good because you're getting insured for a lower amount. You're getting, and the formulas are a little bit different, but essentially, if you're doing better than everyone else, you're getting insured for a lower amount, even though you're capable of producing a lot more, and your acres are worth a lot more than somebody else's because you're a lot better at your job. But if you're basically the worst farmer in the county, you are praying and hoping for some windstorm to come blow every single stalk of corn down out of that field.
Yeah, you're winner chicken dinner. Now, with that much damage, because what Iowa is responsible for, not responsible, but they produce X amount of the country's corn, and then Y amount got destroyed in this storm. Does the average, using the October average versus the February average, is that going to make a difference, do you think?
So the difference would really only happen if the October average was higher. So let's say corn for this October, that $3.42 was basically the October futures, the October average of the December futures as of like yesterday or last week or whatever it was. I think last week is what it would have been.
So it did go down.
So corn is down as of right now.
Okay.
But it could jump or whatever, just based on who's selling what and whatever. So let's say corn jumps to $4.25 for the October average, and that's what it gets calculated. That your guarantee actually jumps up. So the size of the check that you'll get will be bigger. It'll be based on that October average rather than the February average.
Oh, so you want it to go up?
You do want it to go up.
And I would think, again, just me, it's under simple supply and demand. The supply has gotten cut. The demand should remain the same. The demand should remain the same, so that should go up, you would imagine.
Right.
Now, it depends on, I guess, like many, many, many factors like who's selling, how much there is to sell.
Right. And part of this too, the thing that gets missed is this seems like really, really simple math. But the problem here is that 75 bushels an acre, that takes a lot more effort than the 200 bushels an acre, because the 75 bushels an acre is laid down. You got to run your combine at a slower pace. You can't get stuff in and out of the field quite as easy.
Well, and you still have to cover the same acreage. I mean, you have a farm, you have 2,000 acres. You have to get in those fields, get out of those fields, navigate those fields. You have to go to every acre.
Right.
So it's much more labor. It's much more inefficient, I guess.
Right. So it's an inefficient. I mean, it's even if it was totally standing, actually going through each of those acres takes longer when the corn's matted down than it is when it's standing vertically, or whatever. So not only are you getting less than half of your normal yield, it's taking you probably an extra maybe I don't know 50%, or maybe it's taking you twice as much time, or whatever. So it's costing you more to try to recover this corn than it would ordinarily cost you to just get a regular harvest. So that's the problem, whereas the math doesn't always work out. It's generally not, crop insurance, generally speaking, works pretty well. It does a pretty good job of covering costs for the farmer, so no one loses a ton of money, no one makes a ton of money. Now, I think he did say the last couple years that overall, because it's calculated every year overall, whether the insurance paid out more, or whether crop insurance programs paid out more, or whether they took in more. And I think the last couple years they've paid out more than they've taken in.
So it's kind of like a Vegas line.
Kind of. Yeah, kind of.
Are we making? Did he happen to mention like any other key flaws to the current system? I mean, that sounds like it seems pretty well neutral.
I think generally speaking, if you talk to any farmer, they're gonna find something to bitch about. They're just gonna like every individual farmer's got their own qualms about whatever. But the main one is what I alluded to earlier with the final plant date, is that when it's super wet and you can't get it, they want to see the final plant date move back. But the final plant date doesn't get moved back for weather. It doesn't. It just doesn't. I mean, unless, I don't know, you may have to have some sort of biblical event or whatever. But even then, I don't know. But generally speaking, the final plant date does not move for weather. So that's honestly the main complaint, I think, from what I understand.
What are some of the highlights, or what are some of the things that stand out in the system, the crop insurance system, that seem like it really works well for everybody? I mean, is there something that's just like, yeah, we like this, don't change this, that both parties agree on, both parts, I guess, entities?
Well, generally speaking, from what I understand, the complaints are they're pretty minor. They're not they're not complaints about major structural pieces of this of multi-peril crop insurance. And it's like, generally speaking, people like it because it gives you different coverage levels. You may only want to pay for 50%. Maybe you want to pay for 85%. You can bounce around. And actually, that's one point I didn't quite touch on earlier. Is that it sounds like the last 5-6 years or whatever, a lot of farmers have not been seeing crop losses. So instead of paying for the 85% coverage, they've been dropping down to 75, 65, 60, 50% even.
So they can gamble. They can gamble on it.
They can gamble a little bit, but a lot of the farmers out there may have dropped down their coverage rates to maybe they were only at 60% or something. And the math is probably not going to be kind to them.
No. But look at the years that they got where they saved on their premiums.
I mean,
and that was their choice. I mean,
but they may not have. But it sounds like they hadn't been dropping down they hadn't been dropped down for a while. It sounds like the last 5 years went by, they didn't experience any losses, or now this year or last year they dropped down. So it wasn't like they've been saving on premiums for years and they just finally had to pay the piper. It was like they were doing their due diligence for 5-6 years, and then this year they were like, I don't know if I want to pay for it again. And then here comes the Derecho.
Yeah, those are. It's what do they say about Mother Nature? Those are the choices they got to make.
Right.
You know.
So it's a tough situation, but from a policy perspective, it sounds like I think the main qualm actually, I think besides the final plant date, one thing I did see was that the loan rate on corn was only like $2.02 a bushel, which is nowhere near enough to cover costs. Now I didn't get ask him too much about loan rate, about exactly what that all entails and what that's all about. And that's something maybe we can talk about in a different show. But you know, for the most part, it sounds like we're to the point where both parties are really kind of just trying to they're making like minor tweaks to the farm bill. For the most part, there isn't really any major structural changes coming in the near future, anyways. So, I think that's about as extensively as I think guys I can cover crop insurance. But we want to get to Derek's stuff here today too. So we are going to talk a little bit about the Postal Service.
The Postal Service.
The Postal Service.
We need to get into a little bit of the Postal Service. Okay, so over the weekend, the House passed a bill to provide $25 billion in emergency funding to the USPS, United States Postal Service. Of course, the White House has already threatened to veto it. The Senate has already pretty much said the White House isn't going to get the chance to veto it. This is better known as HR 8015, if you care to look it up. So a couple little bullet points. They passed legislation that includes $25 billion in aid to the Postal Service. It aims to reverse the new Postmaster General's cost-cutting measures and prohibits him from enacting changes until January 2021. It pretty much passed with Democrats in favor of it. I think it says there's 26 GOP members also favored it. There's a couple things that really kind of stick out to me in this legislation, just at a glance. So the first one is the administration claims that they're strongly opposing this because all this is really doing is it's just handing over money. It's shoveling $25 billion into a service that has not been efficient for a long time. And what the administration wants to do is they want to reform it. They want to reform it, and they want to update it for its continued viability in the modern economy. You know, whether you buy into that or not. I think when everything's all said and done, I think the Trump administration has done a good job on the business side of things. I think they've passed a lot of things that have really opened up business, opened up the economy, generated a lot of jobs. So if that's what they're saying, I would have to obviously look into what exactly reforms they would want to do.
The interesting thing about the post office team, as far as you mentioned, its efficiency too, is it regularly wins awards for being like the best postal service on earth. But if you look at it as a standalone, like
it's not good.
Like if it truly is the best postal service on earth, and it is as bad as it appears to be, why are people so bad at delivering mail? Like
terrible.
Like
terrible.
If it is genuinely, like, if it really is the best postal service on earth, and it may be, why are human beings really bad at delivering mail?
Well, I mean, if you found one unicorn on the planet and you said it was the best unicorn on the planet,
I mean,
unicorn on the planet.
Well, but the USPS isn't the only mail service on the planet.
Maybe. I mean, no, you're right. There's other mail delivering systems, but
I mean, each country has their own postal service. But
you have to look at under what system they're talking about, because sometimes you get isolated into, like when I worked in a job where you got rated, right? You got rated amongst your peers. Well, the job that I did, I was the only one that did it. So every year I got top rating. Well, of course I got top rating. I'm the only one that does it.
Right.
So, but another thing I want to look at here real quick is they prohibit any changes to the USPS until January 2021. And they roll back all of the existing changes that they've put into place. So that's in this legislation. So what the House wants to do is they want to stop the administration from making any changes to the post office, whether they're for whether it's a business decision for efficiency, to modernize it, whatever it is, and anything they put in place. Now, it doesn't say here how far they want to go back, but they also want to roll back all the existing changes that they've had. So just looking at this on its face, this has kind of been a back and forth for quite some time between the administration and the House, really. I mean, the Senate's kind of stayed out of it. The Senate's probably going to go along strong party lines, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But they have their
what doesn't go along strong party lines at this point?
Well, yeah. I mean, this one didn't. Not 26 Republicans went across, So the thing that I've found really striking since I've been in this is Republicans will go across the aisle. They will. They do it all the time. Democrats don't seem to that much. They really don't.
And I think you can look at that in voting patterns too. It's like, that's not to say that no Democrats will cross the aisle or that they never do it. But as a general,
you're not going to see 26. You're not going to see 26 of them go across the line.
No,
there's just no way.
I mean, if those, if the Democrats or Republicans or whatever are firmly in their belief that a compromise is not an ideal solution, then I get it. But, I have a lot of trouble taking some of that stuff serious. Especially when you see that they vote so hard down party lines. It's really hard to look at and take it super seriously, because you're telling me that 150 people or whatever it is think exactly the same way on this issue.
Right. There's not one. There's not one. There's not one out there.
Not one defector. Like 12 Angry Men only had 12 dudes. Like they got 150 here. How do you not have some dissension in there?
And I'm sure that this isn't 100%, but I remember when I got into all this stuff, it was right at the end of the Bush administration, the beginning of the Obama administration. And I noticed when they would come out and talk about their negotiations and all that stuff, I noticed that Obama would very often come to the podium and he would say, the Republicans are unwilling to compromise. But then when you actually do your research and start reading about what the original bill was, what the Republicans wanted to do, what Obama wanted to do, what the Democrats wanted to do, it seemed like Obama's definition of the Republicans are unwilling to compromise was really him saying they're unwilling to give me 100% of what I want, and I'm not going to give them anything of what they want. But he would always come out and say they were unwilling to compromise. But then when I would actually read, and I'm not saying that this was 100% of the time, but the stuff that I read was like, well, this was the bill, and then they're kind of they're going through their negotiations and hashing out what they want.
Well, I think
that he's not budging on anything.
And I think that was kind of almost part of Obama, I think that was part of Barack Obama's kind of, it's almost his, I don't want to say his brand, but that was kind of part of his thing though, is he branded himself as the dude that was going to come in and change. I mean, wasn't that literally his campaign slogan, change? Or something like
Hope
that.
And change,
Hope and change, or whatever it was. Yeah. So, from a political standpoint, I understand where he would see, if I compromise with Republicans on whatever issue, that I'm not committed to change because I'm siding with the people that would represent the lack of change.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I totally get that. The thing that really didn't set well with me was that's not what he said. What he said was the Republicans are unwilling to compromise. Well, a compromise is a meet in the middle. Now, you might meet 30-70. You're still kind of in the middle. You might meet 60-40. Mm-hmm. I'm not expecting like a 50-50 give and take. I'd never expect that in a political spectrum, but he would literally not budge an inch. And then he would come out and say, I would have respected it more if he would have came out and said, no, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to get, and I'm not entertaining any other ideas. But
Yeah,
that's
to me
not what he
that
said.
shows that shows conviction at least, that says like you believe what you believe in. I respect that. I don't
Yeah.
even if I don't agree with it, I respect it. You believe it, and you're trying to do this. So I get it.
I was put here to change Washington, and that's what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. I could respect that. Even if I don't agree with it, I can respect it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what he did, because the way he presented it to the people was, "Oh, these guys aren't. I'm trying to compromise. They're not." You know, and it's like,
I do have a few questions on like how much of that was the husband and the wife wanting to go to two different restaurants and then compromising and going to the wife's restaurant or whatever, like that old the old wives' tale or whatever. Not the old wives' tale, but the joke.
Yeah, and I get it, but it just happened far too. And like I said, if he would have came out and said, "No, this is what I want," and
Yeah.
now we're going to keep our eye on this bill. I'm sure it's going to be dead on arrival in the Senate, but it has been a big back and forth, and there's kind of a backstory to it, or I guess there's a little bit of information, just a little deeper. This could lead to many problems. For what the Democrats want, or at least what we're told they want. They're trying to push this money into the USPS to try and bolster up this idea for universal mail-in ballots for the election. And when I read stuff like they want to hold off on all changes until January 2021, and they want to roll back everything that they've recently done, that to me, that kind of reinforces that narrative. How do you get out from underneath that narrative when you're deliberately doing stuff to the post office that affects them very short term going forward, and wants to retroactively go back and affect them very short, a very short distance in the past going back? Why else would you want to do that? So I want to take a look at this real quick. I got this. It was a meme. I like memes. I know a lot of people don't, but I either laugh at them, cry at them, or I do my research on them. So I got this meme. The post office knows which ballots are Democrat and Republican. D is for Democrat, R is for Republican. Now, I did my research on this, and it turns out there was a female that posted this. I believe she was in Florida, and she and her husband. Yeah, I know, right?
It's obviously in Florida.
Straight-laced Florida, right? We've never been involved in any shenanigans whatsoever.
Yeah, Florida is not just a general disaster.
She received one of these for her and her husband. They're both registered. It's important to know that this is for the registered party, okay? And it's also important to note that these are primary, but it's also important to note that they're on the outside of the envelope. So I looked up a couple articles in the news. I got AP News, USA, CBS, and they all confirmed it. That's true. That actually is how that works. Now,
but it is for primary elections and not general elections.
It is. It's for primary. Now, what they've said is that is not going to be used for general elections. But what I want to point out here is, where I go is there's already whether it's used for the presidential election or not, there is already clearly a system in place to where the potential exists, or the possibility exists, that some sort of easy, readily available manipulation or intrusion is possible. It's right there. It can happen. It absolutely can happen.
Yeah, and we're not even, and it's not even to say that that they would use it, or that it would even work, that they would even do anything with it if they did use it, or anything like that. It's not at all what we're saying. But what it is saying, though, is that it exists.
It does exist.
I don't know why it exists, because...
And I don't either.
I don't get it, because these are primary ballots. They're not going to the same place. They're going to different addresses.
Well, and look at the ballot. There's a barcode on the ballot.
There's a barcode. But I'm like, because the explanation was that they use it to sort more easily, correct?
Yeah, that's what in the research I did, their explanation was it serves as an frontline mechanism for sorting. So when they look at it, they get a stack in, and they RD, and then from there
Right.
They unpackage everything, and then they go through their sorting process or counting process from there.
So my question is, the Postal Service, how do they sort every other piece of mail?
Well, it has their mailing code on
By
it.
the address. The address.
By the address.
Yeah, like you sort mail by the address on the envelope. The envelopes
Right.
for the Democratic primary and the Republican primary are going to go to two different addresses. It's not like it's one dude sitting in a closet counting all the things. Like it's
Exactly.
they're going to be in two different buildings, probably in two different cities, maybe they're not in two different states, but probably in maybe two different cities even. Or definitely two different buildings, two different addresses for sure. So why do you need the extra differentiation with the party code on the outside of the envelope?
Why does it even exist?
Why does it exist in the first place? Because you already have a sorting mechanism on the front, which is the address that's supposed to go to, which is how we sort every single other piece of mail. So why is this different? Why are we marking ballots, even for a primary election? Why are they marked differently? Like, why?
Well,
Like, okay, so
then,
like this reminds me. So you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, I assume, right?
several times, yeah.
So if you remember when they're going through Mogadishu or whatever, and they hire the guy to point out where the bad guy's house is, and they put a big
big X.
the big X on the roof of his car. One thing is if you because so I read the book SEAL Team 6 where he talks exactly about this because it was based on it's about this guy's story from that conflict, from the Somalian conflict, and he said that's actually not how it happened in real life. Because if you put that on top of a car in real life, everybody would be like, what the hell?
Yeah,
why
what
is there
is
an
that?
X on the top of that car? In real life, he said they actually put an actual like a tracker on the bottom of it. And he said the people in the movie decided that didn't seem like real life. So they put the duct tape X on the top. They thought it was like 2007 for real to actually for people to believe it or whatever. But he even said we would never do that because they would be like, what the hell's wrong with that car? If you if you want something to be found, you put a mark on it.
Could you imagine the guy if that happened in real life? Like, could you imagine the guy that hey, we've got this great idea. You're in the game. You're gonna play, you're a major player, and here's what we're gonna do. You got this roll of duct tape, right? And then from there, like, it just spirals out of control.
You know what's funny?
I am not doing that.
You know what's really funny?
And you're going to put the X on the top of the car.
You know what's funny that you brought up that specific example because back in the 80s, Iowa State football being the absolute horror show that it was, they had Jim Walden. I think it was Jim Walden, if I remember correctly. I'm sure Jared will correct me if I'm wrong here. But anyways, Iowa State football had this idea. Or actually, I think it was Kreiner. Anyways, he had this idea that he would reward the star players with a different color helmet. So while most of the team wore gold helmets, the star players wore red helmets. Turns out when you put the good players and you tell the team exactly who your good players are and where they're at, they target them and they exploit that. And it didn't go well at all for Iowa State. Turns out the little morale boost to the star players didn't make up for the difference that they couldn't do anything.
Well, and it like you said, this doesn't make sense to me, and it just there's too many questions here. If it's true, if everything that they're saying is true, then get rid of it. There's no reason to have it there.
Right.
Get rid of it.
You're just opening yourself up. Even if you say it doesn't do anything, we might put it on there, but it doesn't do anything. We're not going to do anything with it. Like, that's not what it looks like, man. Like, it's bad optics.
Yeah,
it's bad marketing. It's really bad.
Not at all.
Someone's going to have to explain to me why that's on there when addresses exist. And you know what? If the primaries
or barcodes.
Right, or barcodes. Like, and if they are going to the exact same address, why? Why would you send Democratic primary ballots to the exact same address as Republican primary ballots? That seems like a bad idea. Like, I don't.
So
why?
I came across this video where I think it was on CBS, where they decided to do a test run on the mail-in ballots just to see what's going on.
And
So
it took place in Philadelphia, if I remember correctly.
it did.
Yep. So it was CBS conducted an experiment and they mailed out a bunch of things just to see what happened, basically.
What happened?
Yep. So we'll roll the clip here, or we'll roll the video.
Now to Campaign 2020. Many Americans are expected to vote by mail for the first time this November because of the pandemic. Across the country, rules vary for when you can get your ballot and when you should return it.
But there is one thing clear. You need to give it some more time than your state might recommend to get your ballot through the mail system. CBS This Morning's Tony DeCopel has more on an experiment CBS News set up to see how long you should give yourself to make sure your vote counts.
If you know how to mail a letter, you already know how to mail in your vote.
How you doing? Thank you very much.
But how long might it take for that vote to actually arrive and be counted?
Oh, you're welcome. Have a good afternoon.
We decided to test it, sending 100 mock ballots simulating 100 voters from locations all across Philadelphia to a P.O. box we set up to represent a local election office. A couple days later, we mailed 100 more, using the same size envelopes and the same class of mail as real ballots here. To approximate the weight, we even folded mock votes into every one. In the following week, we checked our P.O. box for the results.
Mail pickup notice, there's more.
When we went to collect everything, though,
Nothing?
No.
most of our votes seemed to be lost.
That's all I have back there right now. That's
You're
nothing.
sure? Huh? You're totally sure? I believe you. I just...
All right, good. Have a good day.
Okay, take care.
We had to ask for a manager
We're trying to do something about mail-in ballots.
and explain ourselves before someone finally found our votes.
They have them somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
1, 2.
We soon discovered another problem: missorted mail. 2 pieces of it.
We got a birthday card from Mike to Ronnie. Have a sweet B-day. Get it? There's a B on top.
When the birthday greetings ended,
12, 13.
we found a bigger issue. 21% of our votes hadn't materialized after 4 days. And the batch we'd mailed a week prior, some of those were missing too.
So of our 100 ballots, 97 arrived, which sounds pretty good, unless you consider the fact that that means 3 people who tried to vote by mail in our mock election were in fact disenfranchised by mail.
In a close election, 3% could be pivotal, especially in what's expected to be a record year for mail-in voting.
We're going to see somewhere between probably 80 and 100 million voters receiving their ballot that way.
The Postal Service says voters should mail their return ballots at least 1 week prior to the due date. But nearly half of all states still allow voters to request ballots less than a week before the election. So you can forgive the public for being a tad confused.
How long do you think the post office recommends?
About 3 days, 2 to 3 days.
They're saying at least a week.
A week?
They're saying at least a week for your vote.
I just don't trust the mail. That's true.
You don't trust the mail either?
Well, I just don't. I would like to give, especially during COVID, give them ample time to deliver it.
I don't trust it.
Why not?
I don't know. I'm scared that it might get lost in the mail. I just want to make sure that my vote is submitted. Like, I see that it's submitted, that it actually counts.
We should point out that official election mail has a logo that we didn't include, and that is supposed to help expedite it, but our results are broadly in line with the Postal Service's own audits. The Postmaster General declined our request for an interview, but in an email, the Postal Service told us it's committed to delivering election mail in a timely manner. It also says it can handle the expected surge and that it is working with election officials to help with that effort and to educate the public. Tony DeCopel, CBS News, New York.
So that experiment did not go well, I would say.
It didn't.
I mean,
so they have
91% success rate sounds good, but
it's an epic failure. So what they say, they had
but
100 votes, right? Mock
Right,
ballots, and then
right.
they did 100 more. 1 week later, this is the thing that gets me. He had to actually the initial contact he had with the employee at the post office, just I don't know what you're even talking about. He had to go to the manager or some sort of a manager to get his ballots. Now, is that going to happen in an election? Like, we do our election in like a day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to happen?
It's a quick process, yeah.
So you're talking about, I've read story after story where they just find a car trunk full of ballots, where they've got a mini storage unit full of ballots that just never made it. And then sometimes they never get mailed out. Now, the important thing to note is in all this absentee balloting process or mail-in balloting process is they have to be mailed in by a postmark date. So if you never receive it, if you don't receive it until the postmark date or after, it's not even going to be counted. It's going to be disqualified, and there's no way to get that back. Now, I think in there they said 3% never arrived, right? Three out of 100. And then they went on to say between 80 and 100 million are going to vote this way, I believe is what they said. That's 2.4 to 3 million votes just by this little experiment that are gone.
When they say that, what was the percentage on how many? It was like that took like at least a week to get there. It was quite.
Yeah, give yourself at least a week. Most people didn't even know that. A couple days.
Right. Yeah, but he said the letters he sent out. I can't remember. He said what percentage now. That he said certain percentage of them took like days and days and days to get there.
Was it 21%?
Yeah, 21% took a week to get there. Took a week or more.
So, and that's after he went and asked the manager to get his ballots, to find these ballots. So you have the potential that 100% of these ballots were just gone.
Right.
Just gone.
That's not good. Like 3%. And the thing is, it's not a nationwide thing. He did it within one city, within Philadelphia, within the city limits of Philadelphia. It should have been. It's like he could have hand delivered all of those ballots with a greater success rate than the Postal Service did it.
Absolutely.
In a shorter amount of time too.
Oh, absolutely.
In a shorter amount of time.
Drove around.
I mean, it would have been like.
And we're gonna look at a couple other examples, but I've got to get to this because this is an example. Now, you always hear about the joke. It's a running joke, more slanted towards Democrats, of dead people voting. But I've got to get to this. So apparently, in Atlanta, they got a registration for their cat. Deceased cat gets voter registration application.
This one absolutely kills me.
That is staggering. That is staggering.
There's a dead cat getting ready to vote because they say he's been dead for 10 years or 12 years.
12 years.
12 years ago he died. And
now what's weird is if you follow the article, and you actually pointed this out to me. At the end, they make a little pun and they say if he could vote, he would have been a Democrat.
Well, nice, good. 5 out of 10 on the pun.
Yeah, but I think that kind of leans to.
But like, I mean, how does that happen? Like, I mean, I get it, like sometimes names get mixed up, and if the cat's got a real name like a Cody, or like I get it's probably a mix-up, but
I don't see
if it's not. How did this cat end up in the system?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Like,
I don't know how, but this is just one story of many stories. How does it get through?
Like, I think
and what do we do to stop it? What do we do to stop it? I think
I saw I think it was John Oliver's show last week tonight. I saw one of his things or whatever, and there he's talking about jury duty and how like this kid. He was like 10 years old, got summoned for jury duty. It's like a 10-year-old. And it's like, it's clearly a mistake or whatever, but like a 10-year-old got summoned for jury duty. And like somehow that's not anywhere near as ridiculous as a dead cat, a cat that's dead and has been for 12 years getting a ballot registration in the mail. It's way crazier than a 10-year-old getting summoned for jury duty, which is way crazier than most things.
That and it doesn't stop there, But I think it's clear, though. I think it's necessary that we try to kind of peel away the layers of the absentee ballots, the mail-in ballots. I think, and as this develops more, because you still have both sides are throwing stones. But I think we need to try to make a distinction now and try to separate the two now. There is a separation between absentee ballots and what they're calling universal mail-in ballots. So
I think that's a common thing that people need to have. There's a difference there that I think people really need to understand.
Absolutely. Now, absentee voting started during the Civil War, and it was there to allow soldiers to cast their ballots in their home states. And over time, more states began to expand the use of absentee ballots to make voting more accessible to more people, including those that have a disability or facing emergency situations like hospitalization or being sequestered. And even says here, or even on a space flight. So they've got a contingency for a person in space, which I can't imagine the likelihood of that is super high. But
I mean, there's always somebody on the International Space Station.
Now, true. And thank God that they're going to be able to. So how does that work? Does like the Jetsons car go up and get their request?
It's the USPS car, but it accidentally crashes into the moon on the way back.
So
the poor astronaut said he has to just crumple up his ballot and throw it at the world and hope it lands someplace.
It'll get there. Tie it to a brick and just chuck it. It'll get there.
just tie your vote to a brick and just throw it.
Yeah, just make sure, just put it on a bottle rocket, like right before you realize there's no oxygen in space.
Yeah,
you're never gonna get that fire to light. So what they're calling massive universal mail-in ballots is the practice of mailing out ballots to millions of people who didn't request them. They may have never even requested them. So they're going to mail millions of ballots out to people, and they can't even correctly identify who or what is a dead cat. They can't even correctly identify that this is not only not a person.
I can't even take
or maybe I have this backwards.
Seriously right now.
but that this heartbeat is not only deceased, but it's a feline.
It's a cat.
They can't even make the distinction between what should be a person and what is a house cat. But we're gonna just
especially what is a person by absolutely zero definitions. There are no definitions of a human being that also encompass cats. Like
a heart, that's maybe
maybe a beating heart, I guess.
two eye. I don't know.
But a cat, but a dead cat's still a cat. So I don't. Who knows?
So now they're gonna just shotgun out millions of ballots to people everywhere, and these are gonna be. You think that? I mean, the dead cat thing is the tip of the iceberg. There's gonna be unregistered voters, illegal aliens. There's gonna be dead people. There's going to be people. There's already been accounts of deceased getting ballots. There's already been accounts of people getting 2-3 ballots.
Well,
and they're going to shotgun all these out.
The thing to remember about these two is like, wow, those cases are like they're somewhat small in number. Mm-hmm. It's the thing to remember though is that that's only for absentee balloting. I mean, it's only for absentee balloting, and there's not there's a lot of absentee ballots every year by gross number, but not by percentage. Like the percentage of votes that came from an absentee ballot is pretty small.
Sure, but these aren't absentee ballots. So is what I'm saying. Absentee ballots have to be requested.
Right. Well, that's okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
These are just this is what they're trying to implement. They're trying to just shotgun. They're trying to mail you your ballot. And I've even seen, and I would have to actually dig into this a little bit, but I've even seen pictures where they have had ballots that were pre-checked. Now, like I said, I would have to dig into that a little further. But so they're going to shotgun out all of these ballots to millions of people, and that would absolutely lead to overwhelming the Postal Service. They can't even keep up, and that could have catastrophic consequences. They can't even keep up with this exact thing they've done on such a smaller scale that I think the perfect case in point, what is it? New York and New Jersey, I think they have an election that just went through this. Wisconsin just had one that went through this. And the interesting thing about the Wisconsin case that I think is in the Wisconsin case, you had many that are left leaning, that are on the left. The people that are advocating for mail-in ballots now during the Wisconsin case were absolutely against it. And this includes Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Andrew Cuomo. Justice Ginsburg stated in her dissent of a Supreme Court decision that tens of thousands of people who did not receive their ballots in time, quote, will be left quite literally without a vote, end quote. And you have Governor Cuomo, who said, quote, it's a harder system to administer, and obviously it's a harder system to police writ large, end quote. So he's saying it's clear and obvious that a mail-in ballot system is very hard to administer and police. The policing part is the difficult part. I mean, how are you supposed to?
Can you apply for an absentee ballot online?
I'm sure you can. The thing with the absentee ballot, though, is you have to show ID.
And that's why I think, well, from just a purely political perspective, if the Republicans wanted to kill two birds with one stone here, is you say we don't want to do universal mail-in, but we will make getting but we want to encourage everybody to get absentee ballots.
Well, they've said that Trump and his administration have come out and said that there's nothing wrong with absentee ballots. They're for them. Now, you could get an absentee ballot without a photo ID, but you have to, from what I've read, and this might not apply to every state, but from what I read, the states that require photo ID, you have to go to, you have to provide your photo ID, I think within 5 days or 7 days of the actual election. So, you still have to, there's still at least some sort of a policing mechanism in place to make sure that is not being manipulated, and the Wisconsin election was an absolute, and this was I believe their primary that was just this year's back in April.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm pretty much working under the assumption here that we're going to end up with some sort of mail-in voting system. I'm assuming that the Democrats will eventually get their way. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I think eventually a mail-in system will happen.
They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop until they get.
I think they're going to do it, and I think because I think there'll be enough social pressure to do it, but. When that, I'm saying when I think this is my opinion again. Like I said, we let you guys know when we were trying to give our opinion versus facts. My opinion, like I said, is that I think a mail-in system will happen, and one of the things that I'm very much not looking forward to, as far as things I'm going to have to read about online, is after the 2016 election, Republicans spent a lot of time talking about how the Democrats were upset that they lost, and that's why everyone was outraged and pissed about everything and all this. If we have this mail-in voting system and Joe Biden wins, if that happens, no matter who wins, there 100% will be a big investigation into how much voter fraud was involved.
Sure.
100%, as there should be. Well, as there should be in every election. I don't know why there isn't a voter fraud investigation into every election, but there will be one for a mail-in voting system. And if it comes back that there isn't a mail-in voting system, I have a feeling that a lot of Republicans will potentially start sort of sounding a lot like the people, like they said Democrats sounded like after the 2016 election. Like the roles will be just totally reversed, where the Republicans where some Republicans, I think some Republicans definitely will. I don't know how loud it will be, how loud that voice will be.
See, the difference is, I think, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but the difference is there are a lot of Republicans also that don't like Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
So who knows? And
I think generally speaking, now Trump's a little bit different because he's a little bit harder to get. He's not from a sociological perspective, he does not really fit up with a lot of traditional politicians as far as how we look at how traditional party people interact with him as a person and a candidate. He has his base is kind of separate from the Republican Party. It encompasses a lot of the Republican Party, but it's a little bit separate, and because not every Republican is with him, and there are, it's just kind of his own little subset. So he's kind of a unique situation.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that a big reason for that is we, the people, the American people, have let our federal level politics turn into this monster. That
Well,
I
and
don't feel.
that was kind of the point I was getting to, is that I think that while that as a general rule, Trump is a little bit different because people really attach to the person. A lot of people really attach to the person. Generally speaking, Republicans tend to cling more to policies, and Democrats tend to cling more to the person. As a general rule, that's not universally the case. Not saying that that's always the case, or that that's even how you, the viewer, vote yourself. Generally speaking, if you look at polling data and things like that, generally speaking, Democrats tend to vote for the person that they believe is the best person, essentially, the most morally upstanding person.
Right, who they
generally
feel
speaking.
is.
Whereas
So, I wanna take a
Republicans
look at-
tend to vote more towards policies.
Policy. They tend to look at what's going
And
on. How does that person's
there's
policy
merits
affect
there's
me?
merits to both there's merits to both ideologies there, or whatever you want to call it, to approaches. There's merits to both approaches there, but they're different in how they interact with their candidates.
Absolutely. There's. I feel that the higher up you go, meaning under the federal level, you should stick more to the Constitution and to policy, because there's too many people. You're trying to create policies based on how people feel. I mean, I just don't think that's a good. You can get away with that in your household. You can get away with that in a small town. You can, but when you start to go up into bigger cities, when you start to go up into state level politics, and certainly federal level politics, you have to kind of put a lot of that aside. You don't have to dismiss it, but you don't want that to be your leading edge. You want to try, because you're trying to encompass as many people as possible. And when you begin to make your policy decisions based on emotion, you are putting the voice of a small group of people in front of the vast majority of people.
Mm-hmm. And that can be a fairly in-depth discussion that I would certainly like to dig into more in a future episode too. As far as when does empathy make for good policy, or when does it make for bad policy? But I do want to go back to the voter ID and voter registration thing too, because the mail-in ballots make that a tricky thing to.
They do.
It makes it tricky, especially when you're like you said, you're the kind of shotgunning ballots out. I mean, they're going to go to basically every household.
And you don't know who's returning those things. You don't know who's filling them out. There's no check and balance on it. So I want to bring this up a little bit. I got onto Heritage, and they put together.
You're referring to the Heritage Foundation?
Yes, and they put together a sampling of recent election fraud cases across the United States. So, and keep in mind, this is a sampling, and it doesn't go, I think it goes back to like 1982 or something like that. It doesn't go that far back. But the thing that you have to remember here is I think they point out 1,296 proven instances of voter fraud. So what you have to remember, though, is that this is only a sampling, and it's only recent. And recent in election terms, 1982, how many elections ago was that? So you have to understand that, according to the deviance theory, the total amount of people caught, so the 1,296 people caught, represents only a fraction or a small percentage of the amount of similar crimes that have been committed. So this 1,296 instances of voter fraud, and remember, that's a sample. That's not every instance of voter fraud from now back to 1982 or whatever's on their page. That's a sample. So we don't know how big that number really is. But even as big as that number really is, that only represents somewhere between like 4 and 10% of the actual crime being committed. So right now, that 1,296, if that were 100% of all of them, would be around 13,000 instances just off the cuff of potential crimes that have actually been committed, give or take.
Yeah, and I think that's, like I said, the raw numbers don't look high, like they don't look anything spectacular, but when you extrapolate those out over, those were our elections won, which were not anywhere in the same stratosphere as contentious as this particular one. Like
No.
the tensions around this particular election are in a totally different universe than anything we've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And
There are people that are literally, in my opinion, doing some really, really just vile, nasty things because they're still bitter about an election that happened 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough to know true motives and everything without actually, without them coming out and admitting it. But
Sure. There's been some cases of them actually stating it.
But like we were saying with the markation of the post office or of the postal note with the party on there, is that if that was used, there are people motivated in this particular election to do something with it, to do something about it. And
Sure.
I mean, specifically with the Postal Service. I mean, the Postal Service has now found itself, or Trump and the Postal Service have now found themselves in totally different corners of the ring.
Well, absolutely, and this brings up a question that I've had for a little while now. We always talk about, it's a big thing to get endorsements, right? You get this endorsement, that endorsement. I remember I used to get, I never really got mad, but it just always kind of puzzled me that you have thousands, if not more, of these people that would sit at home and wait to see who Oprah was going to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
Who's Oprah going to vote for? And then they just all run out and vote for that person. So it's really eye-opening to see that, just endorsements could push such a swing of voter turnout and election turnout, and then when you find out, I came across this article that the USPS actually endorses Biden, and they state it's a survival move. So, I mean, is this a conflict of interest? I mean, it looks like it is to me. The Postal Union endorses Biden, and they say that the Biden candidacy is the survival of the USPS is at stake.
Survival is a strong word there.
That's a very strong.
That's
word.
very strong wording. It's not saying we're endorsing Biden because we like his policies a little bit better. It's saying we are in survival mode.
Right.
So that's clear and present motivation. I mean, that is,
it is.
That's
It's
motive.
motive.
It's motive. And that's why, like, by presenting this information too, we're not saying that it's gonna happen. If mailing voting doesn't happen, then none of this means anything. But I'm assuming that it does. So if it does, there's a lot of things out there that lead you to believe that it is not totally out of the question that it will not go super smoothly.
No, absolutely not.
And that, like, I know this might sound kind of conspiracy-ish or whatever, but like if a postal worker who's very staunchly pro-Biden and he's a big member of the Postal Workers Union, is delivering mail and he's taking it to a house that's got a Trump sign in his yard, is he gonna deliver the mail ballot? Is he gonna deliver the ballot? Because the envelope will look different. He'll see a whole bunch of those envelopes, so he'll know which envelopes the ballots are in. Or I should say,
yeah, because you get back to the
the
timestamp of the delivery, right? The postmark.
Right.
If he doesn't deliver it, it doesn't. And you look at to add to that. I live in a state where, and I think a lot of states are like this, where the counties that the cities reside in are heavy blue, and you get out into the country, you get out into the rural sections, and it's heavy red. So would you have, if they were coming down and saying, or even hinting, or even planting the seed of, hey guys, if if Trump gets reelected, we could all lose our jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's scary. So now you have these workers that have the potential to, when they go into these red counties, oops, I don't know what happened to those ballots.
Yeah, and
it exists. It's real.
Yeah, and and really the entire point is that there's nobody that is above, unethical behavior. There's nobody. There is no Superman.
No,
and that's like even the most upstanding postal worker person on Earth or whatever. They are still not immune to spur of the moment emotion or unethical behavior.
And they're going to put their families ahead of
absolutely they are.
I promise you they are.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
So I don't either. But it's, and like I said, I'm not saying
well,
that.
And the tricky part
happen.
too is with the postal workers union endorsing Biden officially. Like how many postal workers in that union are Republicans? Probably a decent number. I don't know. I mean, I honestly do not know and have never thought to look up the demographics of postal workers. I don't know if it's skewed like teachers where it's like 80 or 90% Democrat, or if it's somewhere in the middle or whatever. But I mean, do I think that the postal union would have just total mass corruption where they would throw they wouldn't deliver to any red counties or something like that? No, but I mean, if you have enough isolated instances, you can change things. And I think the Postal Service has now acknowledged that.
Well, they have a lot of power. You look at the test run that they did in Philadelphia, and the one employee that was behind the desk when he came up and said, "Hey, I'm looking for this mail," and she goes, "Nope, I don't see anything." That's just one person. That's just one person. That's one person that can affect a huge swath of voters. And he had, like I said, he had to go to the manager to dig deeper and investigate and figure out where all these, mock ballots went. So are they going to do that during the election? Are they going to go around to managers of every postal office and be like, "Hey, you're supposed to do this. Did you do it?" No, that's never going to happen. One person, one unethical person can affect thousands of votes if they want to.
Mm-hmm. And the key here, I mean, it's not the key with all of this is that, or the overall theme here is that nobody is above corruption or being corrupted. And they're like, even us theoretically, like we're not above anybody else. We're nobody, and that's the thing, is that when you start introducing variables into processes and into equations, you are also introducing risks.
Absolutely.
And I think the more steps you put between there, the more risk you introduce. And when you have something as important as a vote, you want to limit risk as much as humanly possible.
You want every vote to count. And I think, going back with just the stuff we presented tonight, there was a case in Wisconsin where it seems like the left leaning or the Democrats were absolutely against it. And now all of a sudden they're absolutely for it. Well, you know what that tells me? We need a system in place where it doesn't matter what the left thinks or the right thinks. Our system is going to be fair and equitable to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think, and this is just my opinion, I honestly think that, voter ID laws should absolutely be federal, and that brings me to the last thing that I have. Voter identification, it just has a little simple breakdown of laws by state, for 2020, and it shows you what laws do and don't have voter ID and kind of how strict they are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of states on there that have no voter ID, like none.
Mm-hmm.
Or, ID requested, photo not required. That's pretty easy to manipulate. If we need an identification to do all of the things that we do in our society, you got to have a photo ID to buy a firearm. You have to have a photo ID to buy cigarettes. You have to have a photo ID to buy alcohol, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a photo ID to sometimes get into venues, you know. But we don't have photo ID requirements for probably one of the most important systems that we have in place. That doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, and the main argument that goes against voter ID laws is access to ID. And
well, that is, and here's what I say to that. Almost all of the people that they say that adversely affects, they have to have photo ID to function in almost every other aspect in life. So you're telling me that they don't have any identification at all? They don't have any identification at all. Because, and correct if I'm wrong, but a lot of the low-income families is who they say this disproportionately affects, right? So these low-income families are very often on government assistance of some sort, correct? Pretty positive you need photo ID to do that.
I don't know. I've never, fortunately, never had to deal with that. But
and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you need to do that, you know. And if not, where these people don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't do anything that requires photo ID.
Right.
Nothing. And on top of that, guess what? Fun fact: a photo ID is not that hard to get.
It's not, and you don't even need a driver's license. The trick I did see. I watched a good video about it too, about the complications that do come with getting a photo ID for some people, like if they don't have access to their birth certificate or their social security card, things like that, where that documentation's been lost because they were moving around project housing, things like that, and how it can take a long time to get a new copy of your birth certificate or things like that.
But
and I get that, but so while it would, it would be too late for this election to turn anything around. Like you wouldn't enact a voter ID law for this election. It's just
right. Oh yeah.
It's
right.
It's way too close to the election to enact something like that. Sure. But if you were to do it, say, effective January 1, 2021, for general elections, now you need, or for any election or whatever, for whatever level of election you want to say, you have to have a photo ID. You have 4 years. Everybody will know about it. And even if you don't have any birth certificate or social security card or whatever it is, you have 4 years to get it. It doesn't take 4 years to get a birth certificate.
So let me ask you this. First of all, there's a process to get a birth certificate.
Sure.
There's a process to get a social security card. So, that saying, what's that a saying? An emergency on your end doesn't constitute a crisis on my end, something like that?
Something
crisis
like
on
that.
your end.
I know what you're talking about.
So if those people, sure, there's people out there that I lost my stuff. Got it. Those are outliers for sure. I guarantee.
That's an important part to think is I know that a voter ID law sounds unempathetic to those people, and maybe it is.
I have to be responsible and keep my identification. I have to be responsible and keep my birth certificate, keep my social security card. So if let's say a small fraction of the people it came up missing or it came up lost. Well, it's your responsibility to keep it and get it. And now you're effectively going to potentially punish millions of people because thousands couldn't keep track of the stuff they were supposed. If they're not responsible enough to keep track of that documentation, then maybe they're not responsible enough to make an educated decision and a vote anyway.
Well, I'm not even saying that either, but because there's lots of different circumstances in which someone can not. Like if someone had their birth certificate and they were, and they knew where it was, and then they came home from work one day and all their stuff was thrown out on the street because they got evicted from their apartment or something like that.
But they also, to not have your birth certificate, not have your social security card, you would also have to be in a situation where you already previously didn't have a driver's license or state ID. I mean, that is like the perfect storm of oops, the dog ate my homework. You know
right.
What I mean?
Yeah, it is. And it happens. It does happen. Just because when you have 330 million samples, you're gonna have one that's just totally wacky, and it's not just one, but even if there's 10,000 or whatever that had this totally perfect storm, I mean you're still talking about a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the total electorate.
It's a fraction of a fraction. And you don't hold the country hostage because of a few.
Well, not even that, but you don't govern based on the needs of the few. You govern based on the needs of the many. You don't you deal with the overwhelming majority of voters have voter ID. And there's an interesting thing that goes into this too. I remember because one of the, I think we haven't totally gone away from it, but the general thing is, Access is saying that specifically minorities have less access to photo ID, and they can't get to driver's license stations because they don't have internet and all this or whatever. And there was one that went on the street and filmed a video where he was just asking people walking along the street in a poor neighborhood and saying, "Hey, do you have photo ID?" And every single one said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you know where the nearest driver's license station is?" And the driver's license
right over there.
It's right there.
Yeah.
So it's 2 blocks that way. It's 2 blocks, and then you go that way, and then you hop up on that street, and you take another right, and then you're there. And it gets you right there. He's like, "Do you have?" This might sound like a dumb question, but do you have internet? He's like, "Well," he's like, "Yeah," and then he's like, "I got a smartphone."
I went like that.
it's like. I mean, I get it that there are some people that are like that, but there are other problems with saying that minorities don't have access or don't know how to use the internet or something like that, so they can't get voter ID. We're not going to go there. But
yeah, I don't buy that as a reason.
That's
definitely
a really
don't buy it as a reason.
That's a very, very poor explanation for it. I mean, yes, there are some people that probably applies to, but they're a very small number. And
I don't buy it as a reason, and I sure as hell don't buy it as an excuse.
No.
I'm held accountable to maintain a certain level of responsibility, and that level of responsibility, just as being a human being and a citizen, is really not that high.
Yeah, and I think the thing, if the Republicans if they win in November and they want to try to kind of smooth, the best chance they have of passing a true federal voter ID law, I think, is you pass it right away, say January 1st it goes into effect, or whatever, the day after Trump were to do his new swearing
inauguration.
His inauguration, or the day after, and say, all right, in 4 years we're going to require photo ID. If you don't have your documentation in order, get it in order. If you don't have a birth certificate and you need a new one, there's a program that already exists, and we will streamline it so that you will get your birth certificate ahead of time. You will get it in advance, so that way we can streamline it down to maybe, even if it takes, 6 months. Say it will take you absolutely no longer than 6 months to get your birth certificate. So as long as you apply by May 1st, as long as you apply by April 1st of 2024, you will have your birth certificate in time to get your photo ID and to vote. Period.
It's not difficult. It's a political thing. It's not difficult.
It
doesn't disenfranchise anybody.
I don't know how you could. I don't know what the argument would be against that.
I don't know. I couldn't.
And you make it free. Make it free for people to get new birth certificates. There aren't that many people that need new birth certificates. Whatever. Pay for it. Make it free. Make it free for people to get new birth certificates if they need a new one.
Well, I think there's a large percentage of taxpayers that would absolutely be for that, as long as voter ID laws went into effect.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
They'd pay for new birth certificates. I think that's something that a tax dollar. I mean, of all the stuff that we waste tax dollars on, I think that's something that people be like, yeah, whatever,
right?
Do it.
So, I think we're ready to wrap her up for this week, though, don't you think?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Mm-hmm. I think so. So we'll be back again Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Time. So remember, everybody, do your own research, question everything.